En Nuevo León se baila la cumbia. Con una negra y a ritmo de tambor.
Howdy, my name is Jake, and today I'm going to talk a bit about a film I really like. But first, I'm going to talk a bit about the tortured artist, which is an idea that we still have yet to depart, in spite of many exorcisms. We are getting edgy, guys. Edgy. I still encounter the idea often enough to tire me out. It might still stick because folks do viscerally feel the connection between art and pain. Art can express pain, but pain is not at all a requirement for art. The stories of artists who hurt themselves and plunge themselves into despair are a plague, just because they believe their pain is the source of their art, and so do we. We believe it's their muse. And when I say this, I don't mean that people shouldn't or can't make art out of their pain, just that having to rely on pain for your art is hella unhealthy. And I think that also goes for art that is painful. Like, I don't think I should, or you should even be hurting yourself to make painful art. I think, like, horror artists should be an example that you don't need to, like, sacrifice 5 quarts of blood for every novel you want to write. Though now that I think of it, that would be pretty metal, so make your own decisions. My point is that you don't necessarily need to do the 5 quarts in order to make a novel. You can do other things too, like your eyeballs. I would like more narratives than this pain one for artists, for everybody really. Art should be whatever the artist wants it to be. Whatever the audience, receiver of the art feels it is or perceives it as. I think this film is something that understands what I'm talking about, because it is very late and I barely know what I'm talking about. The film, it is called Ya no estoy aquí, directed by Fernando Frias de la Parra. Excuse me for that pronunciation. It's from 2018 and it depicts a young teenager named Ulises. He's from Monterrey in Nuevo León in Mexico. He dances in a really rad way with his gang called Los Tercos. A counterculture known as Colombia lives in the streets of Monterrey, where Los Tercos dance to the cumbia rebajada, which is like a slowed down version of cumbia that was like imported into Monterrey. It's pretty cool. It reminds me of dub, but it's definitely not exactly the same. Folks who participate in the counterculture wear baggy plaid shirts and shorts, they wear bandanas and signature greased sideburns and bangs. Unfortunately, Ulises is forced to move to New York City in order to escape the increased violence in his home due to drug rings, cartels, and the militarization of the police. The narrative is told via cutting between the present and the past. Ulises trying to survive on the streets of New York City, and cutting between his memories of Monterrey and of cumbia with Los Tercos. The film begins with his initial departure when he receives an MP3 player full of the music, which is his lifeblood. God, now I'm only thinking about that stupid 5 quarts comment I made earlier. I regret that, because now this line that I said doesn't hit the same. Though, as you can see, I didn't edit it out, so anyways. I think what I meant with what I mean with the tortured artist is that people often make an excuse for pain. They often they try to retroactively justify it. And I think that this is a film that is able to recognize pain and use it to create art without placing that pain on a pedestal or anything like that. It doesn't revel in the suffering of Ulises, which I think is, like, you just appreciate it when you see it come along. The movie, perhaps tragically, shares some distinct similarities with Isao Takahata's, again, sorry pronunciation, Grave of the Fireflies from 1988. Both films depict their young protagonists trying to survive in worlds which demand they bend or else fend for themselves on the streets. They both lead the viewer through the character's past through flashback. Luckily, Ya no estoy aquí doesn't follow Grave of the Fires exactly. In that I mean, we're not following a ghost teenager watching his life up until the moment of his death. And that's not a spoiler, by the way, it happens in the first 5 minutes of the film. I think this comparison is fruitful, since it does imply some part of Ulises' life has ended, and he looks back on the moments leading to that death. This would be the late era of Los Tercos, which is dispatched as a result of the Mexican war on drugs and cartels. The tragedy is that Ulises tries to continue living with that in New York, but the conditions for the life of Los Tercos were so specific and fleeting. And I think the point there, I think, is just that we forget that art is made in specific circumstances sometimes. We're very used to art that is meant for mass audiences, for everybody. It's art with the specifics pared down so as not to alienate, which is a mistake. It's art that is kind of disconnected from place. And I kind of realized that New York is a really good choice for a city for Ulises to have to end up in, because it's a city that's depicted on screen so much that it's kind of lost character. It's become so many characters through so many filmmakers that it's a default stage like a theater would have. Maybe that's a hot take. Discuss in the comments. Anyways, going back to what I was talking about with Ulises reflecting on a life that's past, it's not just a coming-of-age story. This is a violent reality of a corrupt, vile system driven by capital, forcing a culture of stylish joy to end. The style of the Colombia movement is a crux of the film's discussion of language and communication. I think many of the characters struggle to communicate with each other, most literally when there's a language difference. Ulises befriends Lynn, the daughter of a Chinese-American store owner, and they teach each other a little bit about their languages throughout the film. They try to understand each other. Ulises shows Lynn the hand signs of Los Tercos, and explains why they use a star, which it's because it corresponds to landmarks in Monterrey. And again, with the landmarks, his art and his culture are so embedded in the streets of Monterrey, and even if he stayed, he would have lost it, because the culture was changing, and that's the initial reason he left, is because the streets were changing from what they were. So he inevitably strives to find something that was already ending. The fatigue begins to take Ulises as he tries to communicate with Lynn. The labor of learning a language takes a toll on both of them. Not even the other Spanish speakers in New York City speak the same language as Ulises, from his hair, clothes, and speaking style. They continue to see him as an outsider, and Ulises never really connects with anyone else. His dancing and his music are tied to Monterrey and its people. Whenever Ulises tries to make money on the metro in New York City with his dancing, someone ends it, whether it be people who are simply not used to him, or cops. The streets of New York seem to reject Ulises, and he resists the streets of New York as well. He tries to remain a true terco in being stubborn. Though, when the battery on his MP3 runs dry, we don't know if he'll charge it again, and we don't know if the music will come back. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the film as much as I did. I think it is sad and tragic, but spectacular and understated and nuanced and beautiful. So, watch it, please. I guess I did just kind of say spectacular and understated right there, huh?